Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Andrew, and I am starting a new series of videos today to try to help encourage the community to get just a little bit better, or at least a little bit more willing to try the Dark Souls video games. That belongs to the entirety of the series, not just Dark Souls Remastered today. I just figured Remastered is a great attempt for us to start off from a relatively easy beginning. More refined version of the original. It's got its own quirks, it's got its own bugs, but at the same time I think it's a great place to start. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to use this as a platform for a guide that is a bit more easy to digest. A little bit on the wordy side, that's kind of my nature, but at the same time also something that anyone should be able to go ahead and pick up. It's kind of a rule of mine that I believe anybody who really wants to try video games, or anyone that wants to play a hard video game, can definitely do so. It just takes time, practice, and commitment. Those are really the biggest things. And truthfully, discipline. So what we're going to do here today for this particular video is I'd like to demonstrate to everyone the classes in the game, as well as try to give you some hints on what might be the best one to pick for you, and we'll move on from there. So we've got several options. Of course, we'll choose New Game. And for the moment, race and name don't really matter. Obviously, just like the real world, it's a bit of a, it's just the life you're given. Now, when it comes to the version we're playing here, you might notice that we're actually on the PC. So the ability to just name it with my keyboard. We'll do that in a moment. But let's go ahead and focus here on the classes. Now, so for the moment, I'll just go ahead and pick something. We'll call it Andrew. And sex, I'm a dude, so we'll go with male. Now, classes. It's important to keep in mind with Dark Souls' classes that it's really more of a selection of what gear you want at the beginning. You'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen that your statistics, or stats, some people might call them, do change when you select a different class, but unless you're going for maximum experience, meaning you're wanting to perfect it down to just the smallest detail, you can usually pick any class that is on the screen, any of these at all, and you can succeed quite well. It's just a matter of how do you want to go about it. So let's go ahead and start here with Warrior. The Warrior, as you might imagine from the description, is someone that's focused on being able to get up in front of you and just punch you, kick you, slash you. The biggest difference here is it gives you a bit of a more of an all-around experience. You will be spending most of your time up in front of people, slashing them with a weapon, blocking with a shield. You do have the capability to dodge, but you're more of a... If you choose to play the strengths of this class, you're more of a all-around jack-of-all-trades with a bit of a focus on actually melee combat. Definitely a great choice here for beginners, or if you're trying to get to learn all the aspects of the game. The Knight class is basically a variation of the Warrior class, in that it allows you to essentially be up close, smack people. The biggest difference is, as you might be able to tell from the description, it's really meant for players that either need a bit of a more forgiving experience, or at least one where they can play a bit more defensive, they can take their time. You don't necessarily deal reduced damage compared to the Warrior, but more so you're just focused on taking a hit, blocking. The Knight with its original gears, you might notice, is made of a plate or a metal armor. He can't roll for anything. Rolling is something that we'll talk about here more as we move along, but the truth is, rolling is a very important mechanic in this game. And so if you choose to play the Knight, you're choosing to either pick a play style that is focused on standing still, holding still, allowing someone to attack you but blocking it, or something along those lines. It's certainly not for someone who's looking for more of the Aladdin acrobat experience. The Wanderer is kind of the opposite of that. He's focused on a more dexterous or agile type gameplay. As you'll notice, he's got a bit more of a curved sword, and he's not wearing anything that looks to be super heavy. While the Wanderer does focus on melee combat, he certainly can't take too many hits. As you might see, his shield's relatively small, and it certainly won't block much in the way of damage. However, he's a great character when it comes to the concept of rolling, or when it comes to the concept of more dexterous maneuvers, getting behind someone, or running fast. Things that involve a bit more of almost like a pirate style of gameplay without the actual stealing. The Thief class, on the other hand, is very much focused on that sort of thing. Well, Dark Souls isn't necessarily like a video game like Skyrim, where you're going to go out and actively steal something from a merchant or what have you. They do have some really great built-in capabilities. For an example, they have the Master Key. The Master Key is something that you can get early on, either by picking it as a starting gift, or you can go and get it as a thief class. It allows you to unlock some doors that allow you to progress easier, get some good items along the way. Some people may consider it a bit of a cheat because it essentially allows you to bypass natural progression as you learn through the game. But some people really enjoy that, myself included, at least on occasion. The thief doesn't have very much in the way, though, of taking any actual hits. He's very much focused on either rolling out of the way or getting behind and doing a type of backstab maneuver, which we'll get into later. The Bandit, despite its name, isn't actually more of a dexterous class or someone who's focused on thievery, but instead is actually highly focused on strength and pummeling people, more like a barbarian. The Bandit starts off with one of the better melee weapons in the game as far as strength-based and heavy hits, and that's the Battle Axe. Now, the Battle Axe is something where it is a bit more restrictive in its movement, it's a bit slower, but if you're looking for an experience about hitting hard, taking names, not necessarily taking the most amount of hits, but certainly making people feel they can be damaged by yours, the Bandit is a good option to start off with. Its stats certainly aren't too bad either. The Hunter is for someone who's looking for a bit more of a bow-based or range-based experience similar to the Warrior at the very top. They do start off with a bow, and of course a type of sword and shield. Now these swords and shields are not as strong as those of the other classes, like say the Warrior or the Knight, but it does give you something to work with. He currently wields, or she, wields a short sword which is very similar to the long sword, almost exactly the same movement set and abilities to choose from, just slightly shorter, slightly weaker. Their shield isn't exactly much to talk about. It won't block all the damage you take. And we'll get to that, the game mechanics here in a future video. The Sorcerer is an option that's a bit more on the either easy or difficult side depending on your point of view. Most people think of the Sorcerer as the easy mode of the game, and there's some merit to that. The truth is, if you go ahead and decide to play Dark Souls as a Sorcerer, you're going to be able to stand back and pummel people with spells all day long for relative safety. The downside of that is you're not going to get a chance to learn as much about the experience of the game. Most of the time you can sit so far back that you can just simply cast away, kill the person before they get near you. But there are going to be times where you can't avoid such a scenario, whether it be bosses, whether it be a small room. There will be circumstances that you're going to need to get up and close to people. And if you haven't been practicing, you're certainly going to be facing problems when it comes to surviving something like that. Now, Dark Souls may be something that you can learn, and everyone can, but it does have a steep learning curve, and it doesn't really hold your hand when it comes to just the basics of surviving something. So it's important that you go ahead and keep that in mind if you choose to play a Sorcerer. Now, Sorcerer is a great alternative for those that have already played the game through, have memorized its different mechanics or the way people fight and bosses, and just looking for a new type of experience because they have quite a bit of flexibility. Not only sorcerers are great at casting magic, but they can even choose to carry magical weapons and focus on a more melee-based experience. The Pyromancer is essentially a really great class for someone that wants to have the ability to try spells, try casting things, try being at a distance, but also still has the ability to stay up in front and dish out a few hits if necessary. The Pyromancer is the only class that starts off with the ability to use fire spells, which are quite powerful. There is a bit of a different learning curve with that, as the method of increasing your pyromancy is much different than trying to increase, say, sorcery, or the ability to cast holy magic. The Pyromancer also is the only one of these classes that starts off, as you can see, with a level of only 1. So if you're looking for the infamous level 1 challenge in the game, you do need to pick the Pyromancer. They do have a great option as far as the statistics that they're given at the beginning of the game, and truthfully it's not a bad class to start off as. The Cleric is a bit of a mixed bag. While it does have the ability to cast healing miracles on yourself, as well as taking a potential amount of damage, the truth is they don't offer as much of a immediate learning experience. Their damage that they take is a bit more on the medium to high end side, meaning they're a bit softer, a bit weaker. You'll definitely need to use your healing miracles if you choose to play as this class. Now the Mace is not a bad option. for hitting people at the start, especially if you're deciding to fight against things like skeletons. As you'll find out soon enough, each weapon type has its benefits and disadvantages when it comes to fighting different enemies. It's certainly not a bad idea to keep multiple ones of them around. The downside is, as I said, they are a bit more focused on the healing capability, which means you'll be spending more time hitting and trying to drain your opponent down to nothing, kind of whittling them, if you will. They do offer some great safety nets, although so does the Knight when it comes to that capability. I would say this would be an alternative for those that feel they don't have the skills to block when the time's right, a bit more of a motor function problem, things like that, a bit more slow reflexes as they give the ability to cast the healing miracle. Just expect that along the way you're probably not going to do much in the way of damage. Now the Deprived class is actually my favorite to start off as. Not only do they receive equal stats in everything, which means they allow for any range of combination of choices as you progress, but truthfully they give quite a bit of variety when it comes to the nature of how you can pick things up and create your own story. Dark Souls is all about actually its own internal story for you, meaning you'll pick up a weapon or a piece of armor or something that'll drop randomly when you kill something, and oftentimes it gives you kind of a different look or style. You can sort of create your own inner story. The Deprived is the best for this, as they start off with very little, just a very revealing loincloth, a plank shield, which is almost useless other than teaching you about the video game, and the club. Now the club is a great starter weapon if you decide to start off as the Deprived class because of its heavy focus on strength. It's actually so focused on strength that if a person were to just pick the Deprived class and hold that club with both hands, simply discarding or putting away their shield, the amount of potential damage they have is incredibly high at the very beginning. Not only if you upgrade it, but if you focus on strength, you can hit numbers that normally would be reserved for mid to late end gameplay. Now, the disadvantage, of course, with the Deprived class is because their statistics are all set to 11 instead of having a more focused path, it does mean that if you don't plan to play as something like a magician, or a sorcerer, or pyromancer, or what have you, or if you choose to not focus on a more dexterous style of play, you are essentially forfeiting points that you can't get back. Now, in this particular case, the best thing to do is to kind of consider what path you want at first, play it out, and get a feeling for it. So for today's example, we'll go ahead and choose the warrior class, a bit of an all-around, but you can pick whichever one you like. I'd like to go over the gifts now, as those are potentially important as well when you first start. Some of these are rather useless, or at the very least, very situationally useful. Sometimes you'll find that you don't really need them, or they're more for your personal story, rather than actually any real benefit in the game. But let's go and go over each one, and you can pick which one best suits you. The Goddess Blessing, as you can see, is basically just almost like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Not only does it give you all of your health points back, but at the same time it reverses any types of status. So if you're in an emergency and you're poisoned, or you've recently been hit with a bleeding effect, or even worse, being toxic from some of the places in the game, such as Blighttown, this is a really great item to have. The downside is it's just one of them, and chances are you're going to need more than one on occasion. So it's a bit best to really reconsider if you want to have this. It will be a catch-all for those really difficult times, but once you use it, it is gone. Now there are other items similar to this that are in the game, including ones that do specialized versions, those that get rid of toxic or poison or bleeding effects, and oftentimes you can obtain many of those, dozens, if not up to 100, if you really wish to have so, and they're a bit more useful and convenient to have around. I really wouldn't recommend picking up the Goddess's Blessing unless you're just looking for a safety net and you want to be sure. The Black Firebomb is actually quite helpful. Not only does it allow you to deal an extensive amount of damage at the very beginning, it also bases its damage off of a bit of the strength statistic. On top of this, you can go ahead and use the Firebomb to kill the very first boss in the game very early. Let's see, a starting gift is given to you immediately upon beginning the game, and so it's automatically equipped. We'll go and discuss this a little bit more, but basically, when you choose to fight the boss or encounter them for the first time, you don't have any weapons with you. Now, if you're really quite tactful, you can actually use your black firebombs to kill the creature. If you do, not only does it change up the story a little bit, but you also get an opportunity for a free strength weapon. It's called the Demon's Hammer. It's a bit more complicated than that, but the truth is, it's a bit of a fun change-up. Also, you can kill him with as small as 5 bombs, even though you receive 10. The other benefit is if you don't want to use it on that boss at all, you start off with 10 bombs that you can throw in a pinch. They can reach far distances, although they are a little bit difficult to throw sometimes, depending on an angle. But it's a great choice to start off with. Twin Humanities is, well, not as complicated as it sounds. Essentially, every point of humanity in the game, or every time you pick up an item called a humanity, it gives you a few different benefits. Now, I won't go into all those different details on just this stream, but one of the things that we can consider is it provides you with a health bonus, almost as if though you drank an Estus flask. The Twin Humanities is basically just a stronger version. The downside is, even though it's twin, you only get to use it once, so it gives you that higher effectiveness. The other downside is, when you first start the game, you really don't have that much health, and so this item becomes effectively wasted, because much of the healing that you'll get from the effect goes to nothing. That is a great start off, but at the same time, you could choose the God's Blessing for something like that. The other benefit of the Twin Humanities, though, is something called humanity. It's a statistic, and without going into too much, basically it gives you certain innate benefits. The ability to look human again, the ability to kindle a bonfire, which means getting more health potions or Estus flasks when you start off at different areas. So there are some benefits to this. It's not a bad choice, but you will get humanity regularly through the game, so it may not be the best choice either. The binoculars are essentially a waste. While they do provide the ability to aim shots, or to look at far-off distances for role-playing purposes and exploring the world and just really increasing your immersiveness, the truth is the binoculars can be gained almost as soon as the game starts. Once you arrive at the actual town, if you will, that you'll be playing Dark Souls in, you can simply walk out a little bit and it's right there for you on the ground on the edge of a cliff. So to pick this up, it's basically a waste in that respect. The binoculars themselves aren't terrible. They're used quite well and efficiently when it comes to aiming a crossbow, but I wouldn't use this item. The pendant has other purposes I won't go into here without ruining story or what have you, but I can tell you that when it comes to practical play, or actual benefits like healing you, it does nothing. Probably not the best pick. The Master Key is what I was discussing with the Thief earlier. It grants you access to certain doors early on that are very helpful. Now, most of these doors can either be unlocked through progression, time, or just by simply buying the key at a vendor. But it is helpful to have right off the bat, and there's certainly far worse choices. The one downside is, of course, you may end up opening a door that was meant for someone who's just not as powerful as you are, or rather, you're not powerful enough to really go through and survive. An example of this would be towards the beginning of the game, there was a door that if you open and walk out, not only could you just fall off a cliff, but at the same time, most of the enemies you face could potentially kill you in 1 or 2 shots. That'd certainly be a shock, and they give you the wrong impression of how the game's supposed to go. This is more for experienced players, but if you really want to mess around, have a much more sandbox-like experience, it's a great choice. The Tiny Being's Ring is essentially a small health buff. Now, buff is hopefully something you're familiar with, but if not, essentially a buff is something that gives you a temporary benefit or buffs you up. Now, in this case, it's actually a permanent buff. What it does is it will slightly increase your health points just a little bit. Is it the best pick? Depends on your playstyle. This can provide you with quite a bit of benefit if you're a warrior, or a knight, or someone who potentially takes little bits of damage all the time. Now, it doesn't actually heal you, but instead just gives you a larger pool to work with, or having a larger budget worth of hit points. You will be able to go and get this ring later on down the road if you choose to do so, and they don't stack, meaning you can't use them both at the same time. So this is a bit more of your own personal taste. Not a bad ring to start off with, especially if you're trying to learn the game, but it's not going to help you much in the long run. The Old Witch's Ring is essentially another item like the pendant. Not only is it something that gives you no immediate benefit, but it's mostly just for story purposes. Without ruining too much, this will allow you to experience a bit more story in relation to, well, an old witch. If you're not interested in story or you want something with immediate benefit, I wouldn't pick this up at all. Based on what I've talked about so far, I really think your best options are either the Black Firebombs for an immediate offensive experience and the ability to get a powerful hammer. Now keep in mind that hammer is not going to be usable as soon as you get it. It does require some hefty strength to pull off. It's also not necessarily the strongest of its brethren when it comes to hitting or speed or what have you, but it's a great gift early on if you want to use it. If not the Black Firebomb, you could pick up the Master Key. It does provide you with a great bit of benefit, and if this is not your first time or you're comfortable with skipping ahead a little bit, it really opens up possibilities. If not, the biggest next choices are either the Tiny Being's Ring or the Goddess's Ring. Both are economical, helpful, but it's up to you. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and just choose the Master Key. Physique makes no difference, just go with whatever you like. I personally enjoy large upper body. Face is the same thing. Choose whichever one feels great to you. It'll make no difference, no one will reject you, no one will react differently with dialogue, nothing at all. I like Delta Varna. Hair, same thing. These are all cosmetic options. I usually go short. Color, surprise, same thing. I like dark brown, as my hair is brown. If you want to go into a bit more depth, you can choose Customize. And from here, there's a whole slew of options to go through. This is for those people that really like the Sims-like experience, or the ability to customize everything. Me, personally, not that big on it. But I do change some things. A little bit younger, a little bit more bright-skinned, not necessarily feminine, but that's the option in this game. And I like to round out their face just a tiny bit down there towards the bottom. And of course, because I have blue eyes, I like to have blue eyes. I usually like to make my characters look very similar to me in real life, or at least as close as you can get, some sort of idealized version. Once you're finished, that's it. Just simply hit accept, and you're good to go. This is going to be the end of this particular video, but I'm going to go ahead and upload more when it comes to all sorts of mechanics of the game, whether it be running, jumping, maybe not something so simple, but certainly dodging, proper timing, and how to confront battles when you're a little nervous or you're getting a little frustrated because it seems like you're having a hard time. But that'll be the end for this particular video. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment down below. You can send me a type of message, or if you do like this and you want to see more, please, as much as I hate to say it, if you can hit a like or subscribe, you'll be able to see all the different videos that I'll produce, as well as give any type of feedback. Of course, if you don't like it, hit dislike, and we'll go from there. But thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day.